This is wild. This is one of the most brutal chapters in One Piece history, offering a Vegapunk decimating the Straw Hats and teasing us with some juicy trader details. However, the more information we get, the less we seem to actually know. I don't think there has ever been a more exciting time to be reading One Piece specifically weekly. I mean, Marineford comes pretty close, but every week Egghead Island takes a radically new twist, and it all seems to be building up to an incident of historic proportions. That or an incident of not that, more like an incident intentionally erased from history, as suggested by rotund bodyguard Sentomaru, because his words in this chapter gave me legitimate chills. We already know that Egghead Island has the potential to be an even worse Ohara, because Ohara faced a Buster Corps that's 10 battleships, whereas Egghead Island is facing the full wrath of the Marines with 100 ships, which, fun fact, I did check, and during Marineford there was only a fleet of 50 ships assembled to take part in the conflict against Whitebeard. So Egghead Island is currently getting twice as much naval firepower as the entire Paramount War, and we could ultimately end up with this being another Lucia Kingdom style situation, which is tragic because there's a lot of civilians on this island, even if we haven't really explored them at all yet. I did really like the brief Ohara summary panel provided by the ever helpful Sentomaru. The characters were drawn adorably in Oda's chibi storybook style, and this was surprisingly necessary to provide. So think about it this way. The key demographic for One Piece is Japanese teenagers, and a lot of Japanese teenagers reading One Piece weekly probably were not even born when Water 7 was being published. So that's why panels like this exist. It really makes me appreciate Oda's planning process though, because this chapter gave us a lot of insight. With Oda knowing how important both Ohara and the Seraphim were going to be on Egghead Island, he took some very key time during the raid on Onigashima to seed both of those things and gently introduce or reintroduce them to the audience through things like Robin seeing the illusions of Olvia, Soul, and Clover. It's like playing story chess. Oda is always thinking several moves ahead to craft situations like this. Easily the greatest moment of the chapter was Zoro's realization that the Seraphim are all just a little bit similar to King, and then everyone's comic reaction to it, especially Luffy. It is so rare to see Luffy calling someone out for their intelligence, and it just goes to show that Luffy and Zoro essentially share one brain cell, and in this case it was Luffy's turn to use it. I also love seeing Lucci and Kaku get upset, because this is exactly what I predicted. They are now well and truly fresh comic crop, ready to be harvested by Oda. It's proof that time heals all wounds. At one stage, Lucci was one of the most serious, evil, and just like generally detestable leopards we'd ever encountered. Or I guess people in general, it doesn't have to be a leopard, to the point where it would be absolutely impossible to even imagine him interacting like this. But roughly 15 years later, and now he's just our fun, fluffy cat Nakama. The action in this chapter was superbly drawn. There really wasn't a single panel that failed to blow me away, and they really made me feel the impact of what was happening. I like that Oda used Luffy's gear fourth with Lucci's bulky Seimei skills. He gave them both a very similar chonksome physique. Meanwhile, Zoro and Kaku were physically portrayed as anthropomorphized blades, sleek, precise, and lethal. Plus, it's always a treat to see Zoro using Shishisonson. I always love the way Oda draws the perspective of it with the blade hilt in the foreground and just like, it's a truly beautiful attack. We also seem to be going through a brief history of Zoro in terms of attacks. He started out with, classic onigiri, East Blue goodness, and now we've moved on to Shishisonson. Shishisonson is hard to say. And now we've moved on to Shishisonson, acquired during Alabasta. So what's next? Maybe the pound cannon that beat Omon Skypiea, or we can skip that and go straight to Ashura, which is something I'm really hoping we see. Not just because I love Ashura, but because I would be incredibly keen to see Kaku's reaction to the attack that defeated him 2 years ago. Now, during this section, Shaka, that man, he did himself no favors in terms of being a suspicious dude guy. And I found it especially odd that he all of a sudden went, I am pretty sure I know where Stella is, and then just casually walked away. He didn't run. He didn't do it with any sense of urgency. He just turned his back and walked out like it was his lunch break or something. It's also a bit weird that it took Zoro to inform everyone about the Lunarians when Shaka should surely know their weaknesses as well. However, to be completely fair to Shaka, you could say the same about any of the Vegapunks. Each and every one of them should be aware of the Lunarian weakness. Also, to be fair to Shaka, he got shot in the head. So that's definitely a point in favor of his innocence. But we'll get to that situation in a bit, because the end of this chapter just, it messed with my mind brain. So while I still have some coherence intact, this chapter was a complete and utter disaster for Team Usopp. They had the classic horror movie thing happen, you split up the group and then bam, immediate negative consequences. who could have predicted that? I'm actually a bit surprised that Usopp lost to Esnik because he actually has a very good track record of beating little girls. Even if Sugar is actually older than Usopp, she's 22 and he's only 19. But watching Esnik be manipulative in what can only be described as blatant Hancockian behavior was great. Hancock is never afraid to use beauty to her advantage, and Esnik is doing the same thing just with cuteness instead. More so than others, Esnik seems like the most individual seraphim. The others have this very mindless follower type vibe, and it makes me wonder if Esnik's personality traits are going to manifest even further, like maybe even ultimately falling for Luffy. Because now we do have a bit of a big problem to solve. With Usopp and part of Frankie being petrified, along with all of York and Lilith, someone will need to order Esnik to reverse the petrification. As we learned from Boa Hancock, simply killing the user will not reverse that power. Another example of Oda's story chest there, by the way. That gets planted into the Blackbeard conflict so that we can really raise the stakes of what's happening right here and right now. There is still some hope for this group though, as Frankie only became half a stone man, and some people have suggested that this is due to his cyborgian nature. But it's actually just how the attack works. This particular attack only turns the immediately struck area into stone, which we saw a lot of during Marineford. But it's looking pretty undeniably bad, because all this group has left is half of Frankie and the head of Pythagoras. Which is unfortunate because Pythagoras almost certainly knows who the traitor / culprit is, and he is rapidly running out of people to actually tell because they're all so busy becoming statues. I guess their hope is that Jinbei or Stussy will appear, like how Sanji went to help Nami's group. Oh, and speaking of, that was also a complete disaster with Edison down and Brook literally decapitated, which is quite funny because when this trio formed, I made a comment that they seem very underpowered, and I got a ton of comments from angry people telling me that I should respect Brook because he's a big strong bone man. And then what happens? Brook gets immediately decapitated off screen and we're stuck relying on Nami. Which isn't at all a bad thing, by the way. I love seeing Nami in desperate situations because she always steps up no matter how stacked the odds are against her. I will say Oda may have gotten a little bit sidetracked with this Nami action though, choosing to focus on action elsewhere, with probably the most shameless upskirt in the series, choosing to draw Nami from what I refer to as the toilet angle, because we are getting the exact same view of Nami as a toilet seat would. There was some good drama here though, because Nami is of course very protective of children, which spawns directly from her childhood abuse with Arlong. So attacking a child is a big thing for Nami, like a more watered down version of Sanji refusing to hit women. Now Sanji does enter rather demonically to save the day with all sorts of cool shading, very Zoro-esque really, and something I didn't immediately notice is that his eyebrow has changed direction again, meaning that Sanji has activated his genetic enhancements. And the reason he's here is because he must have heard the scream in the last chapter, although this leaves Jinbei and Stussy alone together, which is such a fun pairing because they have exactly one thing in common. So hey, remember that tea party? That was a pretty wild time. Oh yeah, especially when the whole chateau blew up for no reason. That was crazy. Oh, sorry, my bad. You see, that was me. There was a bomb in the tomate box and it all just went boom. Wait. There was a bomb in my people's most precious relic? Well, I should say there was a bomb because it's exploded now. Huh, oh, fair enough. I bet it was that minister of the right. Seems like a very him thing to do. So what was in the box originally? Mostly drugs. Oh. That's nice. That is exactly how that conversation will go. But now we need to talk about the big moment of Shaka being shot in the Shaka head, drawn in a terrifyingly beautiful panel. You can really feel the impact of the bullet with Shaka's contorted and curved body. And you know, sometimes I legitimately forget that bullets can actually kill people in One Piece. Because a lot of the time they're just meaningless. They do nothing. You get a horde of Marines around and it's like they're firing pellet shooters. But every now and then, Oda does draw a very impactful gun scene. Like Charlos shooting Heart-chan or Doflamingo shooting his father. And it's actually very interesting that the murder weapon here was a stock standard gun. Because if the culprit was one of the Vegapunks as suspected, then surely they would have a less primitive method of murder, like a laser beam or something. So this could indicate that the culprit is someone who isn't quite as technologically sophisticated. However, it also has to be someone with command clearance for the Seraphim and someone who knows enough about Egghead Island to operate its systems. So are you starting to see what I mean? The more we learn about this mystery, the less we actually know. I legitimately feel like I know less about what's going on right now than I did last chapter. And thinking about it logically, this chapter would have us believe that all 7 Vegapunks are innocent. Lilith and York are currently petrified, Edison is down, Pythagoras was blown to bits, Atlas is supposed to be with Chopper and Robin, Shaka was shot in the head, and Stella watched it all happen. This is such a beautiful mystery. Oda is hitting all of these beats perfectly. But I really do hope that it has a pretty banger conclusion, because poor solutions can often undo all of the good work put into mysteries. In fact, the better set up a mystery mystery is, the harder it is to pull off a satisfying conclusion. And speaking of conclusions, people are jumping to all sorts of those, suggesting wacky stuff like Katarina Devon is impersonating the Vegapunks or the Elder Stars. Meanwhile, Van Alga is just warping all around the lab and stuff like that. But just stop and just take a deep breath if you're in that camp, because whoever this is has been traitorizing for at least 2 months. And we've seen both Katarina Devon and Van Alga very recently on Amazon Lily, Whole Cake Island, and even the fight against Law. And I hate that I have to ask this question, but it's mandatory in One Piece. Is Shaka really dead? Again, I hate that I can see a panel like this and still go, yeah, you know what, I'm not sure if I can believe that, but that's the curse of One Piece. Oda has refused to kill people so often that I now refuse to believe any death scene, even one as brutally visceral as this. And I don't think we should rule out the possibility of a very naughty Shaka just yet, particularly on Egghead Island where anything is possible through technology, cloning, conscience transference, and even generating tangible holograms. There could be any number of ways to explain how we see Shaka murdered and that still not be the case. And given all the Daft Punk vibes, I wouldn't be surprised to see Shaka return harder, better, faster, and stronger, because more than ever, hour after hour, work is never over. And I guess the Cypherpole agents don't recognize Shaka, but they may not have seen who actually captured them. And if they did, they may have seen Shaka without the mask. Oh yeah, which is another thing. I refuse to believe that this is the end of this character because we still have yet to solve the mystery of what was behind the mask. And really, all I know right now is that Egghead Island is easily one of the most fun arcs for weekly speculation that One Piece has ever had. I absolutely love the ride that Oda is taking us on here, and I eagerly await more.